recording. Welcome formally everybody to the Asian Supervisor Network. We meet once a month and we cover different topics, and the goal of this network is to bring up visibility of coaching supervision in Asia. We have here supervisors and coaches. It's open to anybody who wants to join. We have colleagues from Japan, from New York, from China, from Korea, from India. So welcome everybody. It's a great network. And Julie, thank you very much for accepting the invitation to be here and also for waiting patiently to start the session. I am glad that we were able to make it work. And Julie brought a book. I was having the book next to me. Now it's not here, that I am using now in my coaching trainings. So in my, Nathan went through my coaching training a few years ago, and now we are using Julie's book for to train coaches, because it's a great a book to explain how the whole process of coaching, not only just one session, but how the whole process works. And I met Julie through the group supervision training that we have. She's a graduate from that program. And also I had the opportunity to watch her presenting at WBEX, and now it's coaching.com conferences. And she's doing an amazing job there. So thank you, Julie, for being here, for being part of this session today. And what else would you like people to know about you?
I think you did a good job. I'm an executive coach. I'm a coach supervisor and author, as Damien shared. I'm from Chicago originally. I've been a coach since 2001. And I think that's all I'm going to tell you, because we're starting a little late and I want to get as much good, juicy content in as I can before folks have to go off to their next meeting. And if you do have to leave, just go right ahead. And if you need anything, you can always reach out to me directly, and I'm happy to connect. So as Damien said, I wrote a book. It's called Do Your Best Coaching. And I'm here today to talk to you about a framework called the Intentional Engagement Framework. It is a framework for coaches, but it's also, I think, very helpful for coach supervisors as you work with coaches at any level of development, from the earliest just out of certification coaches to very, very experienced coaches. So today I'm going to introduce you to the framework, and I'm going to invite you to look at it through the lens of a coach, because we're all coaches first, and then we're going to switch gears and talk about how you might apply it in supervision. But before I show you any slides, perhaps I can just tell you a little bit about the genesis of the book and the framework, and then we'll dive in together. As I said, I've been a coach since 2001, and I am on the faculty of the Hudson Institute. And because of that, I work with a lot of new coaches. And in 2020, I was talking to one of my colleagues, Laura Daly. We were talking about the new coaches that we work with. We're coaches, so what do? We talk about coaching. And we were talking about the problems that our new coaches were coming up against, and they were problems we had faced as new coaches. And that afternoon we said, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be great if we had a book that told us how to deal with all of these problems, because we had figured out ways to navigate all of them. And we laughed and we said, yeah, we should write it, and we'll call it We Made Mistakes So You Don't Have to. And that literally was the working title of the book for a very long time. So we started writing, we started talking to coaches, and really initially it was just a how-to book, tactics, things like that. And about a year into it, I was actually at Damien, the America's Coaching Supervision Conference. And I'm going to share screen with you, because this was kind of a pivotal moment for us in our writing. We heard Pam McLean speak, and what she said is on the screen. She said, it's very easy for experienced coaches to fall into habit. Meaningful conversations about what we do as coaches and why gives us the opportunity to be intentional about our practices and re-engage in our work. And it was just like a thunderclap moment for me, because what we had been trying to do was bring together not just the what we're doing, but the why. And for us, this was the why. It was about being intentional. It was about being thoughtful about how we engage with our clients. And that is the genesis of the intentional engagement framework. So let me think just quickly about what we're going to do. I'm going to talk to you about the framework and something called sticky situations. Sticky situations are those problems I was talking about before that coaches can bump up against. And I'm going to invite you again to look at this framework first as a coach and how you experience as a coach. And then we're going to shift gears. We'll build that foundation together. Then we'll shift gears and we'll talk about the evolution of coaches and supervision, right? What's it like to supervise a new coach versus a more experienced coach? And how might you use this to support those different types of conversations? And then we'll get to it. We'll start to talk about it and generate ideas together. Does it sound good? Everybody, thumbs up. All right. Okay. So as I said, that here's a copy of the book. We talked to over 50 coaches, and originally we did think this was a book for new coaches. And as we talked to these experienced coaches, like, no, we want to know, what other people are doing. We want all the best practices. And they also, look, even today I bump up against sticky situations. We all do as coaches. So how can we be really thoughtful about proactively avoiding these sticky situations? And really, most of them can be avoided by an intentional approach. So what do I mean by sticky situations? Well, here's what we think of as the top 10 sticky situations. And I just invite you for a moment to look at them. Oops, that's not where I want to be. My slides got a little nuts there. Hang on. Here we go. Take a look and tell me what you see there. Do you recognize these? Have you been there before? What do you think? And please don't be shy, because let's think, the reason I know about these is because I've done them before, right? So what do you think? You guys can just talk. Say a number if there's one that you've been bumped up against. And I'll tell you right now, go ahead, sorry.
Number 8.
I was just going to say, Nathan, that is the one that everybody says, working harder than the client, right? How about some of the rest of you, Scott? Jonathan?
1, 9, 7.
I was wondering if we
5.
Exactly, right? So
do we get a high score for how many we have in the same client?
Yeah, do we get a point for each one that we have experienced here?
That's a whole new game I could create. Exactly right. Okay, so we're going to dig into this. And really, as you think about the framework that I'm about to share with you, you'll see how it can help you avoid these situations. All right, so what you're looking at is a frame, but it's not the framework, it's the frame of a house. But I love this image as a metaphor for the intentional engagement framework. So you walk by and you see this, and you know that it's the frame of a house before it's been built. And you might walk by a week later and all of this is covered up with drywall and paint, but the frame is still there. And we know it's there, it's holding the space for the rooms. And without it, what would happen? The rooms would collapse on themselves. Well, this is a metaphor. The frame of a house holds space for the rooms, just the way the intentional engagement framework holds the space for the relationship and the work that you're doing with your clients. So we create space, a container for that relationship. And that's what this framework is going to support you in doing. So let's look at it together. Here's the intentional engagement framework. It's 4 phases. I'll walk you through it. Creating the container, establishing the through line, making progress, and ending with meaning. And within those 4 phases, you'll see the 7 different components within the framework. So let's take a walk through this together, shall we? Securing and contracting begins with that initial inquiry call that you might get from a client. And really, from that beginning phone call, that's your opportunity to start building a foundation for a relationship, start educating your client on what coaching is, the importance of confidentiality, boundaries, roles and responsibilities, and really what their role is, what your role is. And then you move into client intake and kickoff. And I'm a big believer in client intake. I send every new client an intake form. My hope and belief is that it's not even my hope and belief, I know it starts them thinking and reflecting and puts them in a coaching mindset so that they arrive at that first meeting already in process, as opposed to waiting to start. So that is what we would call creating the container. Now, we know that that doesn't stop after intake and kickoff, right? But we're going to move to establishing the through line. So early in your engagement, you're going to start with the process of helping your client really build their self-awareness. Who are they today? How do they see themselves? How do others see them? Perhaps through a 360 assessment. And this is important. I am a big believer in helping clients create vision and understanding their values. I'm an aspirational coach, and research will tell you that coaches, clients who work with a vision are much more likely to achieve their goals, and that the relationship with their coach is stronger. So while I'm doing assessment, I am supporting my client in getting clear about their values, developing a vision, and those things come together to create their coaching plan. And that coaching plan is what we use when we sit down with their sponsor to make sure we're aligned on what we've learned and what we're working. I will say this, coaching plans, I'm not very rigid about ripping out the plan at every coaching session. What's most important is the conversation you have to get to the coaching plan. But I think having that plan actually gives you more freedom, because if you have a plan and the client shows up and is like, oh God, I have to talk to you about something that happened to me today, you can pivot and talk to them about that, because you know you've got the arch and the umbrella of the engagement defined for both of you through that coaching plan. So once you've got that plan, you're aligned with the sponsor, you move into making progress. And you'll see coaching sessions, but it's not about the coaching conversation in this model. It's about who I am as a coach. How am I showing up? How am I ensuring that I'm present for my client? I'm maintaining presence through the session. What do I do after the session to reflect and document? And then that midpoint alignment check. And I actually believe in a midpoint alignment check with my client. So hopefully I'm aligning all along the way. How's it going? What's working, what's not working, but a formal midpoint alignment check partially through the engagement. Just have a conversation about what's working, what's not. We also engage the sponsor in a midpoint check. It's a great way to support the process, get the sponsor to see what's happening, provide feedback, and engage them in the support of the client. And finally, we have ending with meaning. And I will tell you, in addition to what we pointed out, working harder than the client, this is one that coaches often will say, oh, I don't really do a great job of ending with meaning. Coaches don't like endings. And but I am a big believer in thinking that the ending should be as powerful as the work that's preceded it. So how do we make sure that we do that? Well, we're going to first of all make sure our client knows that we're coming to the ending. There's no like rushing right up to it. We're going to support them in harvesting what they've learned. We might do a progress check, a touchback on people who supported the initial assessment. We're going to create an ongoing development plan, and then we're going to wrap the sponsor into a conversation so that they can see the progress that's been made, and also really be thoughtful about how they're going to support the client after coaching is ended so that they can transition out of coaching smoothly. So as coaches, you all know that inside each of these circles, a lot of work happens, right? So we have both a book and a workbook. In the workbook, we have a process for each of those 7 components. And I want you to see this, because I said earlier, the model is not just about what we're doing, it's about why we're doing it. And this is going to be important for supervision when you're thinking about how you supervise coaches. You know, particularly a new coach who really wants to understand how to do something. We certainly can support them in learning these new skills, but we also want them to pause and think about, why are we doing it? And who am I as a coach, and how do I feel about these different things, and what's showing up for me as I'm working with my client? So now we're back to our 10 sticky situations, and you can see they line up against the model. I know somebody said being pulled into a rescue mission happened to all of us. One of the things we believe is if you're doing a thorough job early on in those initial inquiry calls, hopefully you can identify if you're being pulled into a rescue mission. And then you can be in a place of decision if you want to choose to do that work or not, but you're not surprised by it. If I stick with that, creating the container, not starting strong and regretting it. Has anybody ever had a client show up for the first session and something has happened and all they want to do is talk about that? They don't want to do intake and start to build the relationship. Anybody? It's definitely happened to me. If you send them an intake form, they know that there's some relationship building that has to happen. You can help and support them and talk about that immediate issue, but then you can return to the intake form, or in the next session, you return back to that. What you don't want to have happen is what has happened to me when I was, at different times is you're 3 sessions in and you're like, oh, I don't know this about that client. So these are all ways to support yourself in the process. So you can see that each of these 10 sticky situations can be addressed by different aspects of the model. So I'm going to pause for a minute. I'm going to go back, pause for a minute. Any questions, thoughts before we switch gears to looking at this through the lens of a supervisor?
I wanted to ask about the idea of how long do you feel you should be spending on each section? I noticed for the 4 containers, the midpoint is like the end of the 3rd container. So how long?
Yeah, it's not chronological. So, if you think about creating the container, that's happening in the first month of the engagement, right? Midpoint and alignment check, if it's a 6-month engagement, I do it, at the end of month 3, beginning of month 4, because hopefully you're checking in with your client all the way around the process. Yeah, great question. Other questions?
I'm wondering, I mean, obviously this is not, I'm imagining it's not intended to be an exhaustive list.
No.
And I'm thinking one of the things, and maybe it fits here somewhere, or maybe it's just somewhere totally different, but is some version of, am I coaching the right person?
Yes, actually we do. We talk about that in the book. We talk about the importance of chemistry calls and that they're not just for the client to figure out if you're the right coach for them, they're for you, so that you can also figure out, am I the right coach for this client? Do I feel a fit? And what do I do if I don't? How do I gracefully exit from this?
That also, but I was also thinking from a more systemic perspective. Often we're coaching an individual, and that's the person we have 95% of our contact with, but they're in a system. And it's the boss, it's the colleague, it's the team, different variations of that.
That might be the next
volume
book.
2? Yeah.
It might be volume 2. Yeah, exactly right. We started a little late, so I'm going to keep going unless there's any other questions, and we'll keep going. And I don't have line of sight to the chat, so Damien, if you see anything in the chat that you can bring forward, please do that. That'd be great. Right. So on the left here, this is David Clutterbuck's model of coaching maturity. I don't know. Is anybody familiar with this? Just give me like a hands up if you are. Yes, no? So this model, and it's pretty self-explanatory if you're not familiar with it, talks about how coaches develop. And early on as a coach, and we've all been there, you just got out of certification, you've got all these models in your head, and you're thinking about, okay, what do I do? What question do I ask? How do I do this? What do I need to do to get them where they need to go? That's that models-based coaching approach. It's a control approach. There's nothing wrong with it. It's everybody goes through it. So as you get more experience and you evolve, you become more of a process-based coach. So you're relaxing that internal voice. You're a little bit more focused on the client, but still more rooted in process. And then you develop further and you become more of a facilitative coach. And finally, the last one, they call it systemic eclectic. And that is really where, I would call it if you're familiar with theory U, it's really spending a lot of time at the bottom of the U, really being connected and deeply present with your client. So as supervisors, we supervise coaches probably at every stage of this coaching development. I'm curious for a moment. Do you find yourself coaching newer coaches, more experienced coaches, a little bit of everything? What type of people do you supervise typically? For those of you who are supervisors, some of you might be just coaches.
I do a lot of training, so I'm working with new coaches.
With new
So
coaches?
they're trying to get to level 1 here.
Yeah. So this will be interesting for you, Scott, and I hope for the rest of you. This is, I love this image. This is from a book by Hilary Cochran and Trudy Newton. It's called Supervision and Coaching. It talks about kind of the evolution of supervision relationships. So on the left are roles, on the right are processes. And what this model says is as you start to work with coaches at different levels of development, your role as a supervisor changes and the conversations you have are different. So early on, perhaps a little bit more advising, a little bit more telling, a little bit more sharing of how to. As you work with people who are more experienced, you're starting to elicit more story, more perhaps metaphor, more internal processing who you are as how you supervise or how you coach. So I love this on the right, this image that kind of supports a coach at every level of this Clutterbuck model. Does that make sense to all of you? Different conversations based on different levels of development. So if we were to go back, and I'm just going to share one more thing, and then we're going to open it up to conversation. If we were to go back to this model, I thought I might just share with you a story or two about a story about supervision and using this model. I have several coaching supervision groups that I work with, and one of them has very new coaches in it. And there is a lot of how do I do this? How do I do that? And what I appreciate about this model is I certainly want to support them in having really good coaching hygiene, right? How do I do this? What do I do? What's the process and the timing? All those good questions. But it's an opportunity also for them to really understand the why. Why are we doing this? Why are we, for example, why do I think it's so important to help a client have a vision? Well, in the absence of a vision, coaching just becomes fixing stuff that's broken. It's kind of heavy and it's not a lot of fun, right? And so aspirational coaching, it's that pull energy. Same thing with a coaching plan. I said this earlier. If I have a coaching plan, we have a lot more freedom to pivot, and coaching is not going to meander around, right? So with a newer set of supervisees, I'm talking about the what, but we're really talking about the why and building that understanding. But if I were to think about a client who is one of, a favorite of mine, supervision client, we were in a conversation and he was really focused on a coaching plan, and I could not figure out why. Why are we talking about the coaching plan? And the more so I stopped him and I said, I understand why, but what is it? What's up for you right now that a coaching plan is capturing your attention? And as the conversation evolved, what we learned was it wasn't about the plan, it was about how he was feeling about his coaching. He was feeling that he was getting really loose with his coaching, and it was turning into just about chatter. And because he didn't really need to follow a process with this particular client, but it wasn't feeling satisfying to him. So it was an opportunity not to talk about a coaching process, but to talk about who he was as a coach and what was going on behind the scenes. So I'm going to stop sharing slides here. And I thought perhaps we could just take a moment. And first of all, before we do that, could you tell me how many of you are supervisors? Because this may be a group of coaches. So I want to make sure okay, so lots of supervisors. And for those of you who are coaches, you can think about this through the lens of your own experience. But as you think about the coaches that you supervise or yourself as a coach, and you think about this model that I shared with you, can you think about supervision conversations where this might have been helpful to think about supporting your coachee? Is there a story or or an opportunity where you might have chosen to do something different? So let me give you a moment to think about that. I was going to do breakouts, but we're going to lose people, and I don't want to do that since we started a little late.
And it's a small group too, so we can just
It's
share
a small
here.
group too, yeah.
Please repeat the question.
Sure. So Scott, you work with a lot of new coaches, right? Can you think of conversations that you've had with some of these coaches where a model like this might be helpful to have a deeper conversation with them about not only what they're doing, but why they're doing it? Particularly when they're just starting out and they're coming back after a coaching session and going, "Ooh, I'm not so sure about that."
I think what stands out to me, because it's training and again, this is supervision, I don't do that much, so I'm gonna hog the time, but I think I am trying to pull them into more PCC level skills, and they're just learning. They're like, can I do this? Can I not do this? They're very much, is this okay? Is this not okay? And it's not fun to move back into that, do this, don't do this space. But frequently I'll try to remind them, you don't not do this because it's against the coaching rules. It's really not that great of an idea in any conversation or in any relationship. That's why we do it in coaching too. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where I am in that pool.
So what I would say, I appreciate that. Yeah. And, you know, one of the things that both Laura, my co-author, and I will say is what we've shared is a perspective. It's not a prescription. I am actually not a very processy person. So it's really about the spirit and the intention of how do you create this space so that you can do your best work with your client, build that relationship, support them in being really clear about what success looks like, and then together co-create how we're going to get from here to there. And then, you know, be checking in along the way. That resonate? What about some of the rest of you?
I will go.
Yeah.
For me, actually, this conversation made me realize my bias. Yeah. So, you know, that, you know, my preference is supervision. It's all about being, it's all about reflection. It's all about, you know, holding the space. So, you know, 100% honest level. I think when somebody brings too much case and too much, you know, competence-based topics, you know, I get irritated. And I wouldn't say that I go to judgmental, but I know there's irritation, you know, arising in me. But I think when you actually overlay the Clutterbuck model with the functions within supervision, I was like, oh yeah, that it was me, not them, you know. So I think, you know, the developmental stage, even actually when I was logging into this this Zoom call, I was thinking more about the adult developmental stage, but I haven't really thought it in the developmental stage in their coaching journey. So that was very revealing. Thank you.
Good. No, I'm so glad. Yeah, I mean, I will tell you also, I love a meaty conversation where we're talking about, you know, really what's happening inside of you, what's getting in the way of you doing this, you know, using metaphors and using different ways to access how the supervisor is feeling. And at the same time, sometimes in their development cycle, a little bit of information about how to do something can open up a whole new conversation about why or how they're feeling. So thank you for sharing. Who else has something to share? Yes, hi. Jean.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to Alex, because I can confirm what you just said, that most of the time what's going on has is really connected with ourselves, and we have to become aware of it, you know. I did a presentation last month, and we did an exercise which is connected with that. It's very important. It's not only about the supervisee, it's also about ourselves. And
Yes.
before coming to the session, it's important for us to become aware of that, you know, because yeah, it can
No.
get in the way. It can really get in the way.
It's dare I say, it's a parallel process, right? So if I think about how I prepare myself for a coaching client, I land and I want to think about who am I, how am I showing up for this client? Same thing for supervision, right? I need to do the same work so I can think about who I am and showing up there. I love that.
So I'm wondering, in the spirit of both and, if it more than do I do this or approach things, leave things off the table because somebody is at this stage rather than that stage, if it's more about having patience and compassion for where they are in their journey and building more bridges, more scaffolding, if we are going deeper than where they might be, rather than not going there. Like, we're not going to just say, we're only going to do eyes 1 through 3 for the next 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, I think the richest supervision relationships encompass all of it, right? And so it's what's showing up in front of you, and how can you expand it to be the richest possible conversation. I see a raised hand. Cian, did you have a question?
It's more of an observation, actually,
Sure.
Julie. I must share something with you. I think it took me a little while to grasp what was being shared when you put up this Cochrane and Newton's models of functions within supervision. And, I suddenly realized that I am different in different sessions with different individuals. There are times when I'm being more supportive on the higher side of that corkscrew model. And there are many, many times when I tend to slip down and move down that path. And I keep wondering, what's in it within me that gets triggered up and down? Is it the client? Is it the context? Is it myself, my moods, my emotions, and how I have come into the supervision or the coaching session, even in coaching, into the coaching session? And in honest truth, I think if I look at it, I'm always dancing up and down this corkscrew.
1,000%.
But
1,000%.
this model it sort of brings that awareness into me. And I think there's a lot more of reflection, introspection, homework that I guess is required here. But thank you for sharing this. It's such an eye-opener.
Oh, you're welcome. I'll share something that Pam McLean is the founder of the Hudson Institute. She's their chief knowledge officer right now. And something that she shared with me, a different thing that she shared with me that really stuck with me is, as coaches we always want to ask questions, and we don't want to be too forward with advice or points of view, but she will be the first to say, a piece of information is fine if it can open up a whole new conversation. No amount of questions or inquiry or metaphors or how are you feeling is going to support a coach who just doesn't know how to do something if they're at an earlier stage. And so, but then can you open up a whole another conversation about what does that mean for them as a coach and for their clients to get into that juicier conversation? So
just a follow-up thought, and I'm just sharing it because it just may trigger something that might shift me. And a little while ago when I just shared this, there was a sense of guilt with me, saying, am I doing something right? Am I doing something wrong? Should I always be more in that supportive role and less on the critical role? There was that sort of a mind map that was there. And then it suddenly struck me that maybe I don't need to be so critical about what I keep doing in a coaching session or a critical session. Maybe I need more confidence within myself. Maybe at some point of time, being in that critique zone is the need of the hour. Because if I look at the interferences that run within an individual for growth, and the model I follow comes from the Vedantic learning, the very first klesha is knowledge. And then comes the others, the fears, the attractions, the aversions, the ego, and all that is below the surface. That comes much later. But the first thing is knowledge. And unless one knows the path forward and has some clarity, or may not be even clarity, knowledge, clarity comes later. But that absence of knowledge can be extremely stunting for a person's growth. So if in a session, one finds that that is what is happening in the room, maybe you need to go down below to assess, advise in a way, but in a way in which you don't shut the individual down.
I think that's really important, is meeting them where they are, creating safety and trust. So because that's where learning happens and where development happens, is in that container. Other thoughts?
I just wanted to chime in there because
Yes, please.
what CN Murphy, you just said really struck me, because we supervisors and coaches, we have to ask ourselves the question whether we are ready to go in the session or not.
Yes.
Because you are talking about because he's talking about the knowledge, but I will say about the awareness of that knowledge. Because when we are in it, then we can get in trouble ourselves. But it's very important that one of the first things, because I know what I'm talking about, that we take care of ourselves. So simple at that. And we are able to evaluate or to feel before the session, can I make it or not? Because there is no problem to tell the client, can we postpone it? Or can we do, because life happens. And sometimes we feel like we cannot say no, we have to go. And that's where we really become our own enemy, because we are not in the full potential of doing what we could have done. And thank you very much for bringing that, because I'm going deeper, because I know that place, and it happened to me really. And there are people in the call who can say that I stood back because I needed to find myself back, because I have other problems in my life that chime in, and that it was very important to feel ready before coming back. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Cian, and thank you, Jean. And then Cian, thank you for staying for a little bit. And Jean, thank you for the comment. I appreciate that. And I really resonate with that. I think it's something that coaches and supervisors often don't feel they can do, is be human sometimes and say, I have a problem, I can't do this. Damien knows this, but I had some challenging family situations this past year. My mom was quite ill. I stopped taking clients for a period of time. I was caretaking, my mom, a really important role. I couldn't be present for new clients. And so I stopped. She's right now, knock on wood, she's doing well. So I just started some new clients, which was exhilarating after being away for a while. Damien, how are we doing on time? I know we started a little late. I want to make sure
Yeah,
it's a
so we
juicy
said
conversation.
to
for
give
everyone.
to spend 15 more minutes, so we have 9:07, so we have like 7 minutes to wrap up, maybe.
Perfect. Well, let me just ask other thoughts, questions. I thought there's a more content I can share with you, but this is a great conversation. What's showing up for you now as you think about going to your supervision sessions, how you might approach them differently? One thing that's sparking your interest these days right now. Mhm.
One thing I'm thinking about
Thanks,
is,
Kat. Jonathan, go ahead. I'm sorry.
sure. No, I was just thinking about people who have a lot of competence in what they've been doing before,
Mhm.
whether it's facilitating or training or coaching individuals, but now they're moving into groups or teams, and how that fits with this as an extra layer of, wait a minute, I'm not where I was before, and how we make room for that.
Yeah.
I think this helps speak to that.
I'm smiling because I just had a group last week this group has really very successful from a prior career people in it who are newer coaches. And sometimes people who have been very successful in former careers are so anxious to get it right in their next career. And so we spent a lot of time talking about, I mean, I will tell you, like, I just walked through a whole process with you, and I am the first to say, you don't have to do it this way. Take what's useful for you. Every client is different. I don't do it the same for every client. Every client needs different things. Every supervisee needs different things. So I agree with you. I think it's helpful for people who have some background, some framework, but it's different. And how do you support them in thinking about doing something different? Yeah, thank you. Other thoughts?
While people are thinking about it, I also want to thank you, Julie, for, I mean, it must be, well, I would imagine discombobulating to not start when you expected to, and then jump in and figure out how much time do I have and what do I adjust. So
It's also midnight here, or past midnight here, so.
For Jonathan too, isn't it?
For you too, Jonathan,
in
right?
New
It's
York,
late.
yeah.
Yes. So I appreciate, I like Jonathan, I really appreciate the flexibility from Julie and everybody
My
else
pleasure.
to
It's
be
my
willing to
pleasure.
participate and do the presentation. And we may invite you back, Julie, to come back and to
We
complement
do
the
something
session from
else, we'll
today.
figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be great to hear. What was nice also was a small group, so people were able to participate more and get to know each other. So that
Indeed.
is really nice because we meet once a month and some people come here on an ongoing basis consistently and some people don't. So it's great. I hope, Jonathan, you keep coming. Not for you, it's late at night, so it's difficult. But Alex, Genevieve, and you never know, Julie, how you make a difference in each of the sessions. Like Genevieve did a session last month, and one of the participants who was a student in my class told me, "Oh, I practiced what I learned with Genevieve, and it was amazing." So it's like,
That's so
you
great.
never know how in these spaces you get an opportunity to learn and grow together and build this community so people can support each other in Asia and everywhere in the world, because here we have people from everywhere. Genevieve is in Paris, so she's in France, so she's in the
Amazing.
middle of the night joining us. So that's
Oh.
commitment. That is
Well,
commitment.
let me share one more thing with you, if you don't mind.
Yes.
One thing that we're experimenting with, Laura and I, is we have a LinkedIn page just for the book.
Mhm.
And so if you go onto LinkedIn and you type in "Do Your Best Coaching," there's a page, and it's just content. So for some of your newer supervisees, for yourself as a coach, we post once or twice a week, and it's all content for different topics of coaching or different thought-provoking questions or conversations. We write for World Coaching, International Coaching Week, we recommended books and had different conversations. So it's a nice landing place just for coaching information.
thank you for that resource. And do you want to also put your email in the chat box so
Sure,
people can have
happy
access to
to.
that?
Yeah, and you can link in with me too. Oh gosh, I haven't not been watching the chat. Here's my email.
These are just comments, but there were not any questions in particular.
Okay, there I am. Feel free to reach out to me and please link in with me.
Well, you talk about a link to a LinkedIn group. Did you talk
Yeah,
about?
hang on, I will give it to you. Give me
Please, yeah.
one quick
Thank you.
moment.
It's a great, and the book is a great book. As I shared before, I recommend it to you, particularly if you're working with other coaches. A supervisor is a good resource for coaches to see the whole process, coaching process. So I've started using it in my coaching trainings. So
Yep.
Julie, thank you very much.
Wait, I'm going to give you the link right here for the LinkedIn page.
Meanwhile, Julie does that. I share briefly with everyone.
Thank you.
That next month, Leanne Lewis, she's going to be doing a session.
Oh, she's great.
She is. She's going to be presenting, and I am going to be in Argentina. So it's very late there too. So she's going to cover for me next month. So we're going to meet in Jerez, Zoom ID instead of this one. So I'm going to send the invitation with a Zoom ID and with all of the information, but for you to know, we will not meet in this same Zoom ID in a different one. So thanks. Thank you, Julie, again. Thank you for your flexibility and great session. And thanks everybody for staying and participating.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
So nice to be with all of you.
Thank you.
See you later. Take care.
Bye-bye.